Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I had been with Rachel for 6 years, married for 4, and until recently, I had believed we were solid. My job as a firefighter meant long shifts, unpredictable hours, and the occasional night where I'd collapse in a bed, too exhausted to say more than a few words to her. But I trusted her. I never thought I had a reason not to. Lately, though, something felt different. Rachel had always been ambitious, but it wasn't until she got promoted to store manager at the high-end fashion boutique downtown that she became someone I barely recognized. She had always loved luxury, but now she obsessed over it, dressing in new designer clothes that I knew she couldn't afford on her salary alone. Work perk, she said when I asked about the Gucci heels on our bedroom floor. Discounts. She rolled her eyes when I questioned the gold bracelet that had suddenly appeared on her wrist. God, Nate, it's like you don't even listen. My district manager gave it to me as a thank you for hitting our sales goals. I let it slide. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then she started coming home later than usual, sometimes well past midnight, and always with some excuse. VIP clients, she'd sigh, dropping onto the couch. They want personal styling, and you can't exactly rush people who spend 10 grand in one sitting. I bought it at first, but little things started gnawing at me. How she'd be oddly tense when I hugged her, how she'd shower the moment she walked in the door, how she turned her phone over whenever she set it down. One night, we were at a dinner party with some of my firefighter buddies and their wives. Rachel had always been a social butterfly, but tonight she was on edge, checking her phone under the table. Work emergency? I joked, nudging her. She gave me a tight smile. Something like that. A text flashed across her screen before she could lock it. I only caught a glimpse, but I saw enough. Can't stop thinking about last night. A cold weight settled in my stomach. I didn't react. Not yet. I wasn't about to make a scene without proof. But in that moment, I knew Rachel was lying to me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying that message over and over in my head. Can't stop thinking about last night. The words burned into my mind like embers from a dying fire. I wanted to believe there was some logical explanation, something that wouldn't confirm the worst, but deep down, I knew better. I knew Rachel, and I knew that she had just looked me in the eye and lied. The next morning, she was already gone when I woke up. I checked my phone. No message, no note, just silence. That was new. She always left me a quick text, something about grabbing coffee before work or an early morning meeting. But today, nothing. I went through my usual routine, but I was moving on autopilot, my thoughts somewhere else entirely. Rachel had never given me a reason to doubt her before, but now the doubts were all I had. I needed to find something concrete, something that would prove, one way or another, what was really going on. I started with the obvious. Her closet. The floor was littered with shopping bags, high-end brands I knew she wasn't getting with any work discount. I reached into one and pulled out a men's designer watch. It wasn't mine. A slow rage started building in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed more. I searched the rest of the bags, but nothing else stood out. Then I checked the nightstand on her side of the bed, pulling out drawers, feeling around for anything out of place. That's when I found it. A small wrap box. A gift. The tag didn't have a name, just a handwritten note in her unmistakable cursive. Can't wait to see you again. I gripped the box so hard my knuckles turned white. Who was this for? My first instinct was to storm into her store and demand answers. But that wasn't smart. If she had been lying to my face all this time, she'd find a way to do it again. No, I needed to be careful. I needed to be patient. And most of all, I needed her to think I was still in the dark. A slow, calculated idea took shape in my mind. If she thought she was being clever, I'd be even smarter. I took the box into the kitchen, carefully unwrapping it. Inside was the watch. Sleek, expensive, the kind of thing you'd buy someone you really wanted to impress. I stared at it for a long moment before setting it down on the counter. Then, with the quiet precision of a man who had nothing left to lose, I grabbed my toolbox and got to work. I wasn't a master craftsman, but I was handy enough. I popped off the watch's back casing, messed with the battery, and scratched the inside with just enough damage to render it useless. Then, I placed everything back the way I found it, careful not to leave a trace. By the time Rachel came home that night, I was sitting on the couch, flipping through the channels, pretending like nothing had changed. Long day. I asked if she'd drop her bag by the door. She sighed dramatically, like she was exhausted. You have no idea. I smiled. I'm sure it was tough. She had no clue. The next few days felt like walking through a minefield, waiting for something to explode. I watched Rachel carefully, noting every little detail. She still smiled at me the same way, still kissed me before leaving for work, still sent the occasional text during the day. But something was different. Or maybe I was different. Now, every time she looked at me, I wondered if she was picturing someone else. The watch was gone from the drawer. That meant she had given it to him. I waited, expecting some reaction when her little gift turned out to be a broken piece of junk. But Rachel was good at hiding things, too good. If she was angry, she didn't show it. If she was scrambling to fix her mistake, she kept it well under wraps. Then late one night, I got the confirmation I had been waiting for. I had gone to bed early, pretending to be asleep while Rachel stayed up scrolling through her phone. The room was dim, and I kept my breathing even, resisting the urge to crack my eyes open. I could hear her typing, pausing, deleting, then typing again. It was subtle, but there was tension in the way she moved. After a few minutes, she let out a quiet sigh and got up from the bed, heading into the hallway. I waited 10 seconds, then followed. She was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, phone pressed to her ear. I stayed just out of sight, heart pounding in my chest. I don't know what happened, she whispered. It was working fine before. A pause. A low voice, muffled, responding. No, I swear I didn't drop it, she hissed. Look, I'll get fixed, okay? Just be patient. Another pause. Then, quieter. I miss you too. I closed my eyes, fingers curling into fists. That was all I needed to hear. I stepped back, moving quickly down the hall before she could notice I had been listening. By the time she returned to bed, I was already under the covers, lying still. She slid in beside me like nothing had happened. But now, I knew exactly what was happening, and I knew who I needed to blame. The next morning, I decided to do some digging. Rachel had mentioned a new hire at the boutique a few weeks ago, some wealthy client turned VIP that she had been personally handling. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now that I had a trail to follow, I wasn't about to let it go cold. I drove to the boutique on my lunch break, parking across the street. The store wasn't busy, just a few customers browsing. Through the glass windows, I spotted Rachel immediately, chatting with a sharply dressed man. He was older, mid-50s maybe, with slick back hair and an air of arrogance about him. I watched as he laughed at something she said, resting a hand lightly on her back. I clenched my jaw. There he is. I didn't storm in. That would have been stupid. Instead, I waited, watching, analyzing. After about 15 minutes, the man left, stepping into a sleek black car that looked far too expensive to belong to an average shopper. I pulled out my phone and snapped a quick picture of the license plate. Now I had a lead. That night, I decided to confront Rachel, subtly. I wanted to see how much she was willing to lie to my face. Busy day at work. I asked over dinner. She barely looked up. Yeah, exhausting. Meet anyone interesting? Her fork paused halfway to her mouth before she smiled. No, not really. Just the usual. Liar. I nodded, forcing myself to act normal. That's good. We ate in silence after that, but in my mind, I was already forming my next move. Rachel thought she was playing a game, keeping secrets. What she didn't realize was that I had just moved my first piece across the board, and I wasn't going to lose. I spent the next few days gathering every bit of information I could without tipping Rachel off. The man from the boutique, her so-called VIP client, was named Daniel Hawthorne. A quick search revealed that he was a wealthy investor with a known reputation for extravagant spending. He had a wife, kids, and a mansion in the hills. From the outside, he looked like any other high-society businessman, but I knew better. I had seen the way he touched Rachel, the way she smiled at him like he was the only person in the room. I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. I started with her schedule. Rachel had always been particular about her routine, but lately, there were inconsistencies. She would leave early for work, claiming she had inventory to manage before the store opened. Or she'd stay late, saying she was handling special client requests. Most of the time, I let it slide, trusting that she was telling the truth. But not anymore. On Thursday, she left the house at 7 a.m., dressed a little too well for a day of running a boutique. A fitted black dress, heels that clicked sharply against the tile floor, perfectly styled hair. She kissed me on the cheek before heading out the door. "I might be late tonight," she said casually. "Some of the new shipments are behind, and I have to deal with it." I just nodded. "All right, be safe." The moment she was gone, I grabbed my keys and followed. Her usual route to work was a straight shot downtown. But this morning, she took an unexpected turn, heading toward the upscale part of the city. I kept a safe distance, gripping the steering wheel tight. Eventually, she pulled into an underground parking garage attached to a luxury hotel, not the boutique. My heart pounded. Rachel didn't get out right away. I watched from my car as she sat there, checking her phone. Then, 5 minutes later, another car pulled in, a sleek black Mercedes. Daniel. He parked beside her, and they got out almost simultaneously. There was no hesitation, no awkward pretense of client and professional. He reached for her waist, and she leaned in, laughing as he whispered something in her ear. Then, together, they walked inside through a side entrance. I gritted my teeth. I had my proof. I could have confronted her right then, could have walked inside and dragged her out, demanding an explanation. But I wasn't interested in explanations. I wanted something bigger, something permanent. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. If she wanted to keep playing her game, I was about to change the rules. That night, Rachel came home with the same lie. "Work was brutal today," she sighed, kicking off her heels. "I swear I need a vacation." I looked up from my laptop, feigning disinterest. "Yeah? That bad?" "The worst." She sat beside me on the couch, curling her legs underneath her. "What about you? How was your day?" I shrugged. "Uneventful." She smiled and leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad I have you. You're the only good thing about my days sometimes." I forced myself to stay still, to not react. How easily she lied. How effortlessly she played her part. I wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "I love you," she murmured. "I love you too," I said. And for the first time, I didn't mean it. Over the next few days, I began setting my trap. First, I installed a small tracking device in her purse. Nothing too obvious, just enough to confirm what I already suspected. Next, I contacted a private investigator, someone with experience in high-profile infidelity cases. He agreed to tail Rachel, gathering photographic evidence of her meetings with Daniel. Finally, I prepared for the final step. Rachel thought she was getting away with it, that I was still blind to her betrayal. But soon, she would realize just how wrong she was. And when she did, there would be no escape. The hardest part wasn't waiting. It wasn't watching Rachel walk through the door every night, pretending she was exhausted from a long day at work when I knew exactly where she had been. The hardest part was keeping my anger under control. It took every ounce of patience I had not to snap, not to throw everything in her face before my plan was ready. I needed one last piece of confirmation, something that would make sure she had no way to talk herself out of this. The private investigator had done his job well, delivering crisp, undeniable photos of Rachel and Daniel entering the hotel together, sharing drinks in the lounge, disappearing into a suite. But I wanted to see it for myself. That Friday, I put my final step into action. Rachel had told me she was working late again, something about a VIP client needing a personal styling session after hours. I acted as if I believed her, even going as far as making dinner for us before she left. "Smells amazing," she said, grabbing a bite of chicken off my plate. I forced a smile. "You sure you can't stay? It's been a while since we had dinner together." She sighed dramatically. "I wish, but work calls. You know how it is." "Of course." She kissed my cheek, grabbed her purse, and walked out the door without a second thought. I grabbed my keys and followed. I knew exactly where she was going, thanks to the GPS tracker in her bag. The little blinking dot on my phone confirmed she was heading straight to the same hotel. I kept my distance, arriving a few minutes after her. From the darkened corner of the parking garage, I watched her step out of her car, adjusting her dress before walking inside. Less than 2 minutes later, Daniel arrived. He didn't even look around. He was comfortable, secure in the knowledge that no one would ever catch them, except someone already had. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. I wasn't here to make a scene. Not yet. I waited. 30 minutes. An hour. 2. Then, finally, I made my move. Instead of barging into their room like a madman, I walked up to the front desk, calm and collected. I had planned ahead, and it paid off. After a few well-placed words and a generous tip, the concierge provided me with something priceless. The security footage. By the time I left, I had everything I needed. Rachel had no idea what was coming. When she walked through the front door later that night, she was all smiles. "Ugh, I'm so tired," she groaned, dropping her bag on the counter. "I swear, these long shifts are going to kill me." I looked up from the couch. "Yeah? You worked the whole time?" "Of course. You didn't, I don't know, take a break? Maybe grab a drink at a hotel bar?" Her face barely flickered, but I caught it. "What? No. Why would you even ask that?" I shrugged. "Just wondering." She laughed, shaking her head. "You're weird sometimes, you know that?" I smiled back. "Yeah, I know." She had no idea that her entire world was about to crumble. The next phase of my plan was already in motion. Rachel thought she was getting away with it, that I was the clueless, devoted husband who would never question her. But soon, she was going to find out just how wrong she was. And when she did, there would be no way to undo what she had done. The weekend crawled by in excruciating silence. Rachel acted as if nothing had changed, moving around the house with a sickening ease. She still kissed me goodnight, still asked about my day, still flashed that same perfect smile, so rehearsed, so calculated. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have mistaken her for the devoted wife she pretended to be. But I did know, and now, every moment she breathed the same air as me felt like an insult. She had no idea what was coming. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Rachel was already preparing for work, standing in front of the mirror, applying her makeup with precision. The same hands that had so easily betrayed me now traced gentle lines across her cheekbones, brushing over lips that had spoken 1,000 lies. I sat at the kitchen table, pretending to scroll through my phone when she walked in. "Got a long shift today," she said casually, pouring herself coffee. "Might have to stay after close. Big order coming in, so I need to do inventory." I nodded, taking a sip of my own coffee to keep from laughing. The audacity of it all. She thought she could keep lying, thought I would keep swallowing her pathetic excuses. "Sounds busy," I replied. She turned, finally looking at me, studying my face like she always did when she was gauging whether she had me fooled. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, meeting her gaze. "I'm great." She smiled, leaning down to kiss my cheek before heading out the door. The second she was gone, I set my plan into motion. Rachel always left her designer handbag on the counter before heading out, but last night, I'd slipped a small GPS tracker into one of the inner pockets. It was a backup plan, though. I already knew where she'd be. The boutique. After hours. With him. But today, she wasn't just going to meet Daniel. She was going to meet consequences. I drove downtown, parking in a space with a perfect view. Across from the boutique, a massive digital billboard loomed over the street, currently displaying an ad for some luxury perfume. That wouldn't last much longer. At exactly noon, my phone vibrated. A single text. "It's up." I lifted my gaze. There it was. Rachel's face, frozen in time. The grainy security footage showed her stepping into the hotel lobby, hair perfect, outfit immaculate, slipping past the concierge desk with Daniel right behind her. Another image followed, a shadowed silhouette through a hotel window, unmistakably hers, standing too close to him. And beneath it all, bold white letters, VIP styling after hours. Ask for Rachel. It took less than 5 minutes for all hell to break loose. The boutique doors flew open, and Rachel staggered onto the sidewalk, staring up in horror. Pedestrians were already gathering, pointing, whispering, laughing. Some snapped photos, others gasped, covering their mouths. The ripple effect was immediate. Strangers stopping mid-step, people across the street craning their necks. Rachel's hands trembled as she snatched her phone from her bag, dialing frantically. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. A sharp voice rang out. "What the hell is this?" The boutique manager, a short, sharp-dressed woman with an expression like a thunderstorm, stormed onto the sidewalk. Her eyes flickered between Rachel and the billboard, horror creeping across her face. Rachel spun, hands raised as if she could somehow smooth this over. This isn't what it looks like. The manager's lips curled in disgust. It looks like you turned my store into a brothel. Rachel paled. No, I can explain. You're done here. The words were final. Rachel's mouth opened, but nothing came out. People were filming. Her coworkers had stepped outside. Her entire world was imploding in real time, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Then her eyes found me. For the first time, I saw true panic, true fear. I stepped out of my truck, crossing the street at an unhurried pace. People moved aside, making way, sensing the weight of what was coming. Rachel's breath hitched. Nate, I pulled something from my pocket. The divorce papers. Her gaze dropped to them, then shot back up to me. No, you don't have to do this. I let them drop to the pavement between us. It's already done. She shook her head wildly, grabbing my arm. We can fix this. Please. I pulled free. You broke it. Now you get to live with it. Her knees nearly buckled. I could hear the whispers around us. The laughter. The judgment. I turned my back on her for the last time. And as I walked away, the only sound I cared about was the one I'd been waiting for. The boutique door slamming shut behind her. She was out of my life. For good. I didn't go home right away. I wasn't in a rush. Instead, I drove to a quiet diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where no one asks questions, and the coffee is always refilled before the cup is empty. I slid into a booth by the window, watching the world move on without Rachel. People still walked the streets, cars still hummed along, and somewhere out there, she was probably crumbling. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. Not yet. The divorce papers were signed and delivered, but the fight wasn't over. Rachel wasn't the kind of woman to go down without a final act of destruction. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then another call. And another. By the fourth attempt, I picked up. Nate. Her voice was tight, controlled, but on the edge of breaking. I didn't answer. You can't just do this to me. A slow breath. I didn't do anything, Rachel. You did. Silence. Then, I lost my job. You should have lost it a long time ago. A sharp inhale. I have nothing now. Are you happy? I swirl my coffee, watching the steam rise. Not yet, but I will be. She cursed under her breath. You're a monster. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Funny. That's exactly what I thought about you when I watched you sneak into that dressing room with him. Nate, I hung up. She called again. I turned my phone off. By the time I got home, my lawyer had left a message. She's already trying to contest the divorce terms, he said. She wants alimony. Says you publicly humiliated her and ruined her career. I laughed. Out loud. She thinks she's getting a payout for cheating? That's the claim. A pause. She's also fighting for the house. Of course she was. I could picture her now, standing in an empty boutique, jobless, friendless, desperate. She had no backup plan, no safety net. And when Rachel was backed into a corner, she fought with everything she had. Let her try, I said. The next morning, I met my lawyer at his downtown office. He was sharp, efficient, and had already compiled a folder an inch thick. He slid it across the table. This, he said, is the reason she's getting nothing. Inside were photos, financial records, text messages. A carefully constructed case proving that Rachel's downfall was entirely of her own making. The footage from the boutique, the money she spent on secret hotel stays, even messages between her and Daniel confirming their affair. This is airtight, he said. I nodded. Make sure she knows it. The next court meeting was brutal. Rachel sat across from me, a shell of the woman she once was. She lost weight. Dark circles lined her eyes. Her perfectly styled hair was limp. For the first time in years, she wasn't wearing designer clothes. Her lawyer tried to paint her as a victim. She's lost everything, he said. Her career, her reputation. She destroyed it herself. My lawyer countered, sliding the evidence across the table. And my client won't be financially responsible for fixing it. Rachel wouldn't look at me. In the end, the judge didn't give her a dime. She stormed out of the courthouse, heels clicking against the marble floors. I followed at a distance, watching her yank out her phone. She was calling someone. I already knew who. Daniel. I took my time walking outside, letting the cold air settle over me. When I reached my truck, I turned just in time to see Rachel on the sidewalk. She wasn't alone. Daniel stood in front of her, arms crossed, expression unreadable. She was pleading with him, gesturing wildly, but he wasn't budging. Then, just like that, he turned and walked away. Rachel stood frozen, phone still in her hand. She had no job, no lugar, no money, and absolutely nowhere to go. I climbed into my truck and drove off without looking back. She was finally getting exactly what she deserved. The first night in my new apartment was quiet. Too quiet. No clinking of Rachel's wine glass. No sound of her heels pacing the floor. No sharp sighs when she was annoyed with me. Just silence. I sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, a half-eaten takeout box on the coffee table. It felt strange, the kind of emptiness that wasn't quite freedom yet, but wasn't regret either. I picked up my phone. No missed calls. No texts. I'd half expected Rachel to try again, to show up at my door in some dramatic last-ditch effort. But she didn't. Maybe she finally understood there was nothing left to save. The next morning, I woke up early, went for a run, and cleared my head. The city felt different now, like I was seeing it for the first time. Without the weight of Rachel's manipulation pressing down on me, I noticed things, how the sunlight stretched across the pavement, how the air smelled crisp instead of suffocating, how people actually smiled at each other instead of walking with their heads down. I wasn't sure what my next move was, but I knew I wasn't staying in that apartment forever. This was a pit stop, not a home. At work, the guys had already heard about the divorce. "You're a legend, man," Mason said, slapping me on the back. "That billboard stunt? Unreal. Did she really get fired?" Someone else asked. I nodded. Mason whistled. "Brutal. Necessary," I corrected. They didn't argue. It didn't take long for Rachel's downfall to become public knowledge. The boutique issued a statement distancing themselves from her unethical behavior, and within days, she'd vanished from the social scene. Friends who used to flock to her now kept their distance. The same women who once envied her now whispered about her behind her back. I didn't bother keeping tabs on her, but the city was small and rumors spread fast. She moved in with her sister, Mason told me one day. Must be bad if she's crawling back there. Rachel hated her sister. I shrugged. Not my problem. And it wasn't. For the first time in years, my life was mine again. No more walking on eggshells. No more second-guessing myself. No more sacrificing my happiness to keep someone else comfortable. I started going out more. Nothing crazy, just grabbing drinks with friends, hitting the gym, actually enjoying my own company instead of dreading what I come home to. One night, I was at a bar downtown when I saw her. Not Rachel. Someone else. She was laughing, head tilted back, completely at ease. There was something different about her, something real. Not like Rachel's carefully curated perfection, but effortless. Authentic. Mason nudged me. "You should talk to her." I almost didn't. I wasn't sure if I was ready. But then she looked over, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than anger. I felt possibility. I picked up my drink and walked over. "Hi," I said. She smiled. For the first time in a long time, I smiled back. Months passed, and life felt different. Lighter, freer, as if I had finally stepped out from under a shadow I hadn't even realized I'd been living in. Rachel was no longer a weight in my life, just a chapter one had finished reading. The pain, the betrayal, even the anger, it had all faded, replaced by something much better. Peace. The divorce had gone through faster than I expected. Rachel didn't fight. Maybe she thought she could salvage her reputation if she didn't drag it out. Maybe she had already moved on to another so-called VIP. Either way, I got what I wanted: the house, my financial stability, and most importantly, my freedom. She got exactly what she deserved. The last time I saw her was in the courtroom. She looked different. The perfectly styled hair was there, the expensive clothes, the designer bag, but something was missing. That spark of superiority, that smug confidence she carried everywhere. She wasn't untouchable anymore. She was just another woman who had played a game and lost. She barely looked at me as she signed the papers, but when it was over, she finally spoke. "That's it." I met her eyes for the first time in weeks. "That's it." She hesitated, fingers tightening around her pen like she wanted to say something else. Maybe an apology, maybe an excuse. Maybe she was waiting for me to say something, to give her a reaction, to show her she still had an effect on me. She got nothing. I stood up, gathered my things, and walked out of that courtroom without looking back. That night, I stepped into my new apartment. My apartment, a place I chose, furnished, and built without the ghost of Rachel lingering in the corners. It wasn't a penthouse, it wasn't some luxury condo, but it was mine. The first place I'd ever lived that felt like home. I set down my keys, loosened my tie, and poured myself a drink. Outside, the city lights stretched into the distance, flickering against the dark sky. My phone buzzed on the counter. A message. "Hey, are you free tomorrow?" I stared at the screen for a second. Emily. She wasn't just some random woman I met at a bar. She was someone different. Someone who made me laugh when I wasn't trying to impress her. Someone who didn't need a designer label to feel important. Someone who looked at me like I was enough, just as I was. I exhaled and typed back. "Yeah, I'm free." I set the phone down, took a sip of my drink, and leaned against the counter. Rachel used to say I'd never find anyone better, that I'd come crawling back when I realized how much I needed her. She was wrong. I didn't lose her. I got rid of her. And now, I had everything I needed. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.